2 months and just a couple of days, maybe 14 days, since Cloudflare helped me reach a milestone. And that milestone was my first back to in-person conference as a moderator, Canadian Women in Cybersecurity 2022. In keeping in line with this afternoon, evening, or morning, depending on where you're joining us from, of milestones, 2 other milestones are marked in the month of July for me. July actually, no word of a lie, marks 3 months since my first Cloudflare implementation, where I helped a client improve their website services through a CDN application that I knew very little about. And that was my first exposure to Cloudflare, and I've never looked back since. But more importantly than that as well, July also happens to be the month and the 2-year anniversary since I launched the Power Hour with CyberX. So welcome to the Power Hour today, my first Power Hour after Canadian Women in Cybersecurity, and we're going to continue some of the lessons learned from that conference over the next 60 minutes. My name is Ali Hirji, and you all know me as the host of the show and a faculty member and lead of the Center for Cybersecurity Innovation here in the beautiful city of Oshawa. I know we have 100+ viewers from around the world, and wherever you're joining us from, thank you so much. But more importantly, I do want to make it known that the Indigenous space also constitutes online spaces as well, because our fiber optic cables, our ground cables, our aerial connections all run across this land, sky, and ocean. Over the next 60 minutes, I'm going to take you into a meeting and a discussion with 3 individuals from Cloudflare who will pay homage to a very important note that you'll see on the Cloudflare website. If you go into that career section, you'll see a little note there that says, what's different or what's great about Cloudflare is the people. And the 3 people that I'm going to introduce you today are representative of that. I've often said that most of our technology challenges are not because of technology alone. It's also because of culture. And we'll be talking about how do you grow and build a sound and strong cybersecurity culture for a pretty strong company. You'll also see one other note on their site which says, at Cloudflare, we recognize that people cannot be placed into boxes. So today, we're going to not just think outside the box, but as I always say, we are going to break the box. Welcome to the Power Hour. If you've got questions, drop it in the live chat, or if you're feeling shy, you can directly message me. Whatever your questions may be, technical, non-technical, HR related, ask away, and in the last 15 minutes, I'll make sure to bring those questions up. So without further ado, let's go and meet 3 of our guests. I'll be boarding the metaphorical Cloudflare jet and going across the United States to meet each and every one of them. Firstly, we're going to start with Susan. Susan, welcome to the Power Hour. Tell us about your role and why Cloudflare. Susan.
Wow, that is a hard to follow, but I will try my best. So my name is Susan Chiang. I've been at Cloudflare about 4 years now. So an anniversary or milestone of sorts for me is coming up imminently. I'm our deputy CISO, and it's been a privilege watching Cloudflare go from a private company, starting with a small security team and growing it to a public company that is as well as a sizable security team compared to many constructs. So I think what's unique about my role, I love that you bring up boxes, and Janet may cringe at this, but one fun fact about my role at Cloudflare is I actually joined without a job title or a job description. Talk about having no boxes at all. That's another way to break the box, just never put a box there in the first place. I think at some point when we became a public company, we were advised that that was not necessarily going to fly anymore. But I think that embodies the journey I've had at Cloudflare, is this ability to do many different things, to be really spread organizational wide and really grow and adapt with what the company has been and will be. And I think that ties well to just an overview of what Cloudflare does and what we're focused on, right? Cloudflare is actually one of the world's biggest networks. And I love that you talked about land, sky, and sea and the geographical nature, because we're actually in over 275 cities in over 100 countries. But like, what do we do with that network? It's been fascinating to see what we can do when you can deliver every single thing on every single server in every single one of those cities and every single one of those countries. So I'll break it down into three categories. They're going to be macro categories. So I think first and foremost, it's a network. We provide network services. So as mentioned earlier, a lot of you know, we provide a CDN and the layer on top, WAF, bots, DDoS mitigation, right? And we have that several layers. So we also have application services as well. And then we also, for all of you developers out there, we also have developer services, especially utilizing your ability to code directly at the edge. So edge compute, workers, streams, pages. So those are for all of your developers out there. And of course, with everything at Cloudflare, you can get started for free, especially for those of you on your personal websites, personal domains, personal projects. I think over half of the Cloudflare employees definitely do that on their personal domains. And lastly, I think the part that I'm most excited about, and I think really connects with everyone here as a security practitioners, because it's so core to what security teams do. And it's also our largest priority this year is our zero trust services, right? It has been, I cannot tell you how many conversations I've been in the security and CISO community where this is one of the top 3 areas of focus, because the last couple of years, we've become increasingly more remote, the world's more dynamic, and therefore we need to shift how we work so that we can actually verify every single connection, and so that we can work in a more hybrid way and in a more expansive way. So we have a number of products there, and I think what's so cool about it from my perspective is that so many of them actually came from or ideated, or features came from the security team doing it at Cloudflare ourselves. So one of my first projects at Cloudflare was implementing, Cloudflare access across everything we do, and then adding a hard key as a second factor. And I'm super proud to say now we've continued that journey where, yes, everyone at the company can only use a security key as their multi-factor. And that's really helped us stay nimble and really embrace a zero trust approach.
Fantastic. And Susan, I said this also at CISO Forum 2021, which, and I happened to moderate a session for Cloudflare there as well. So thank you, Cloudflare, for the trust. CISOs don't necessarily have to always be the ones that put the no in innovation. And you just exemplified exactly that, where you've enabled it in a nimble fashion. To all of our audience members that are listening, regardless of which stage you're at in your cybersecurity career or in terms of your implementation and knowledge, there's a very interesting perspective that Cloudflare takes, and that is this idea of the public internet has technically become the corporate cloud and the corporate architecture where business happens. This has to do with people working virtually, people moving remote, people traveling and working, so on and so forth. And this is where Cloudflare plays a very significant role. That concept of the shifting perimeter or the absence of a perimeter whatsoever is something that I'm going to dive into a little bit as we go forward, especially in terms of what does this mean if you want to work at Cloudflare? How do you need to understand the perimeter? So Susan, thank you for that wonderful introduction. I'll board my flight from your location to wherever Janet is. Janet, your name, well, we already said your name, but tell us a little bit about your role, your title, and what about Cloudflare keeps you at Cloudflare?
Yeah, thank you, Ollie. I'm Janet Van Huysse, and I'm the head of people at Cloudflare, and I'm coming from Chicago, Illinois, and the suburbs of Chicago. Typically, I'm based in the Bay Area, but I'm with the shift toward remote work. I'm moving around myself, so I'm visiting some family in Chicago. So excited to be here today. A little bit about me or my story. I've been in HR in tech for over 20 years, 25 years to be exact. I moved out to San Francisco in 1997. I was a former school teacher turned HR professional. And so been doing tech and HR for over 25 years, and usually at the intersection of tech and media. And so Cloudflare was my first time really getting into security company, and I just could not have made a better choice for the company and everything else that's going on in the industry and the market. So I always say Cloudflare has been my favorite place to work, the best job I've ever had. We're going to talk a lot about why that is today. And like you already said, Ali, a lot of it's the people that we're able to work with, but certainly, at least since the beginning of the pandemic, we've really felt that the internet feels more important than ever. And I love when Matthew, our CEO, talks about how, every hero, has a sidekick, and the hero of the pandemic, and actually, I think days since has been the internet, but the trusted sidekick of the internet is Cloudflare. And one of the things that has made, I think, all of us feel a really deeper sense of purpose in our work is how important the internet is, either to get information to people who need it, help understand like the spread of the pandemic, help all of us work from home safely and really be able to support this transition for a more flexible and more remote way of working. I think that's got a lot of silver linings for what it means to be a worker today and kind of the future of work. I'm really excited about that change that we're in the midst of, and really excited to be here today to talk about the really interesting things our security team has done and will continue to do, and the role Cloudflare has in keeping the internet safe, faster, and more reliable for everybody.
Well said, Janet. And as we always say, that change is the only constant, and to be constantly changing and constantly innovating, in order to do that, you do have to burn some boxes. So Janet, a really nice introduction complimenting Susan, but I think it's also important because I know I've personally invited quite a few folks who are exploring their next opportunities in the Toronto market when it comes to the security space. HR has a lot to do with people. And just remember this in the examples that you've heard so far. Products make a business, but it's truly people that build a business. And these are the people behind Cloudflare. So please drop your questions and feel free, again, like I said, instant message them to me, tweet them to me if you will, or drop them in the live chat, and I'll make sure in the last 15 minutes that I get to them. Now, I got aboard a flight, but I don't know exactly where to go because this individual in the green room gave me his background not too far away from where I lived, Tanzania, and then made references to the Caribbean, and then even Montreal, and then even Markham. So I'm just going to board this flight and see wherever it teleports me to. Scott, welcome to the Power Hour. Where are you joining us from, and what's good at Cloudflare? Scott?
Thank you very much, Ali, for having us here. I'm actually joining this call from the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm out in the East Bay, if you're familiar with the area. And to your point, Ali, a little bit about me. I'll start from there. My folks are from a country called Togo, West Africa. It's right next to Ghana. And if you're familiar with the West Coast of Africa, so it's just a couple of countries over from Nigeria, bordered by Burkina Faso, and right on the Atlantic coast. So that's where I hail from. But let me talk more about who I am and then touch on some of the questions that you have. So I've been at Cloudflare for almost 5 years, and it's just been so far my best company on many, many levels. And if you're hearing this, it's not a sales speech. It is actually a true experience that I've had so far at Cloudflare. And my tech journey started initially at Google, and then went on to Twitter, where I had the privilege to work with Janet Van Huysse, who was the first VP of HR at Twitter. At Twitter, I worked with Janet to take Twitter from 3 countries to 20 plus countries in a number of years. And that's really my sweet spot, helping companies grow exponentially. I had the privilege to travel the world there, meet with different folks across Asia Pacific, in Europe, Latin America, learned a lot about how to grow companies, about cultures, about what really makes people tick. And then after a stint at Facebook, Janet reached out, and it was just a no-brainer to come back and work with her again. She's an incredible leader who really, really is great at building amazing cultures within the tech space. So I've been here for 5+ years, and I have 4 kids, married, beautiful. I spend most of my time with my family. And what really makes me tick, as I mentioned before, is if you were listening to what Susan mentioned, our network is quite expansive, over 270 cities and over 100 countries in the world. To be able to do this, we really, really need to find great people who are passionate about our network, passionate about our culture, who just want to build the future of the internet, and even help make the internet better. So that's what I specialize in. And then I just, again, really thrilled to be part of this journey here. Now, you mentioned Markham, you mentioned Trois-Rivières, and Canada is a very, very dear place to me. At Twitter, I spent some time helping build Twitter Canada, and it's a dear place. So if you're a francophone on this call, et si vous souhaitez participer à une mission ambitieuse pour aider à construire un Internet meilleur, il faut nous contacter, il faut me contacter tout juste après cette émission. Thank you.
Everything that Scott said. Yes, because I'm going to pretend like I understood that. But Scott, really important. Again, there's so many threads that we can pull over here in terms of how you found yourself at Cloudflare, the associations, the connections. A couple of things, right, is that those same companies that you're working for before could now also utilize Cloudflare products, which creates that connection. But I think it's really important that in your title, you have the word talent. And as you've just exemplified really, really well, is talent's one thing, but you also need the courage and the character to go with that, and the character to make these switches, and the character to believe that this is the right place for you to work. For those of you, and I know a couple of you have already done it, if you've gone to the Cloudflare career pages, you'll notice some very interesting perks, including something around vacations. Take a read, because it is a very, very interesting set of ideas to go through. And Scott, I share with you in the experiences from Africa. Africa changes you like nowhere else in the world. Or as my dad always reminds me, God will work everywhere, but will come to rest in Africa. Whenever I think good thoughts, I always think Africa and my roots there. So Scott, Susan, S Squared, and Janet and myself, let's go and rock this. We've got a good 45 odd minutes, and I know questions have started to come in. Keep them coming. We see them. We will come to them. Susan, I want to start off with you, because the important thing about going on a journey is getting started. Now, you mentioned at the beginning that there are various areas. You mentioned zero trust. You mentioned WAF, which is web application firewalls. You've also mentioned the fact that SASE-based architectures, serverless architectures, etc. There are many areas where Cloudflare can provide services, and also different enterprise sizes, from a 1 to 2 person shop to a 100,000 employee kind of like situation. But Susan, if I had to ask you right now, as a CISO, when you look at Cloudflare, where are your priorities from a service perspective? What are the top 3 you would say where we're seeing a lot of attention and we need more talent to continue to grow our presence and our service profile? Susan?
Sure. I think that's a great question, and especially pertinent to what you said. What are the priorities, right? We're heading to uncertain times. You have to be much more thoughtful and much more deliberate, and also think about what is it you're trying to do with that business and contextualize that with security. I know you said services, but I have to say every single time it is truly the people. Right. As you alluded to, Cloudflare has grown a lot in the last couple of years, and that growth and the company has grown, and so has every single person that's worked there. How we continue to adapt and create an environment where people feel like they can continue to do their best work, that their role continues to excite them. And especially in the tech industry, where the average tenure is maybe 2 to 3 years, right? We have a lot of amazing people that are the backbone of what we've built, literally, with the products, right? And how do we make sure that there's still exciting career path for them? And if we think that, how do they move on from Cloudflare in a way where they bring Cloudflare to their next company, whether it's actually implementing the products or actually bringing the amazing culture we have, right? And really taking that Cloudflare family and culture a global scale. So I do think, and in so many of the CISO conversations continues to be talent and the great cyber shortage and all of that. So I do want to start there. I think secondly, zero trust does continue to be a big focus. I think for us, we are extraordinarily lucky to have gotten started on that earlier on, and we're probably later on the journey where we feel fairly confident in what in terms of how we do the first layer. And now we're really thinking about more fine-grained role-based access control, data segmentation, and how can we enable people to do their best work in locations that are maybe riskier, but are maybe attractive to employees for personal reasons, or the fact that we want to reach customers there. So it's such a fascinating problem to solve, opportunity to solve in that front. I think on the third side, it's really about how do you scale your security, right? it's with the breadth of what we do exponentially growing and the fact that the company is getting larger, the last thing we want to do is go, well, it took 5 people to do this last year. I think there will be 30% more work. So I'm going to add 30% more people, right? That's just, it's fundamentally not scalable. Number 2 is you're missing these opportunities to empower those people to find ways to make things more efficient. And I think that is truly not just a security priority, but a company priority, right? We still see boundless opportunity in front of us. Yeah, we're going through some uncertain times. So our ability to seize those opportunities, yet still run, is identify those wins for efficiency, empower people to solve them so that we can do as much as possible.
The website for Cloudflare says something very interesting about the profile of the Cloudflare team, and I'll read it verbatim. 3 words are used there: principled, curious, and transparent. And if you look at this, there's a set of principles in terms of what Cloudflare is trying to do to build a safer and a better internet. They are curious because, for one, you see them on sessions like this. When they are busy, they have other things to do, but they go into this because they want to learn more. But more importantly, they're transparent. They're openly sharing not just the breadth of their footprint, the services that they provide, but also what they know and do not know. And I think this is extremely important when you're trying to build a good, not just cyber company, but a cybersecurity culture. Now, Janet, I want to work with this just a little bit. And would it be a session with me if I didn't go off script just a bit? So I'm going to go a little bit off script. I did warn you in our prep call. Yes, I did warn you. My memory is pretty low, but I did say this. But anyways, Janet, let's work with this a little bit. So Susan made mention about hiring for certain qualities, etc. Janet, look, in the cybersecurity space, whether you're looking to hire from a sales perspective or a technical perspective or an operational perspective, there is a challenge with talent. There are a lot of positions, a lot of funding going into new companies in security, a lot of mergers and acquisitions that are happening as well. In this whole landscape, Janet, from a hiring perspective, how do you make a firm like Cloudflare stand out to the prospective candidate? Janet?
Yeah, I think 2 things. One is we are a very mission-driven company. And so if you believe in that the internet is a critical part of life and that we want the internet to be safe, faster, reliable for everybody who uses it, not just for people who pay Cloudflare or other companies, then that mission, if that resonates with you, I always say when people join the company because they believe in the mission, I'm like, you will not be disappointed. In fact, I thought, how I mentioned in my intro, I'd spent my career at media companies and they were all consumer facing. And so as I was interviewing at Cloudflare, I had the story in my head that if I was going to go to a SaaS company, that I would have to give up being at a mission-driven company because I thought the mission of all SaaS companies was very simple: get more customers, get your current customers to spend more money with you. Very simple mission. And I thought, well, that could build a really great business. Just isn't lighting my heart on fire, right? So I'm in my interview process. I'm talking with our CEO, Matthew, and we're talking about empathy, which I promise you is a very common thing to happen at Cloudflare, is to be in conversations about empathy. And as we're talking, I keep bringing up the customer, because I have the story in my head that it's all about the customer. And Matthew is a smart dude, and he stops me and he says, Janet, our mission is not to help build a better internet for people who pay us. It's to help build a better internet for anyone who is using the internet. And in fact, we want to get the internet to people who aren't using the internet. And so when we talk about empathy at who it is that we're in service to, it's anyone who uses the internet or anyone who should be using the internet. Much more expansive than my kind of myopic view of the customer. And so that was a very aha moment for me in my interview process. But now I'm almost 6 years at Cloudflare, and I will say it is the most deeply mission-driven company I've ever been at. Whereas when I was in my interview process, I thought, oh, yikes, can I give up being at a mission-driven company? And so it's one of the things I think is a real differentiator for us. But one thing I think that's also really important for us, we talked a bit about culture. And I've spent my career at high growth companies. So it's a very similar storyline for the 4 companies I've worked at. The first 2 got big, got acquired, really excellent exits. Scott mentioned we worked together at Twitter. We brought that company public together. And now we did the same thing here at Cloudflare. And And one of the things that that I've learned is at high growth companies, your culture can get away from you pretty quickly. And the reason being is I've got this definition that culture is defined by the behaviors that you reward at a company. And when you're going through moments of high growth or hyper growth, you're bringing in all these new people, and they can, depend on your rate of growth, overwhelm your culture with behaviors that maybe were rewarded at another company that aren't aligned with your company. And so one of the very first things that we did when I started Cloudflare was like, let's define what those behaviors are that we reward at Cloudflare that make us successful at Cloudflare. Let's be really explicit about it. And we can, one, use it as a compass as we grow. So they're called the Cloudflare capabilities. There's 6 of them. And so we bring that into our interview process. It's called an Orange Cloud interview, and it's just based on those capabilities. So that helps us understand, like, is someone aligned with the behaviors that are going to make them successful at Cloudflare? And it helps them choose. Are you high empathy? Are you deeply curious? Are you able to get your work across the finish line? Do you embrace diversity to make Cloudflare better? We can screen for that at the beginning. But I think the real secret sauce for Cloudflare is that we use this very simple equation that helps us preserve culture as we grow. And that is performance equals results plus behaviors. So the how you get your job done really matters at Cloudflare. So you can't be a high performer if the results are great, but the behavior is not so good. So like not being honest with customers or throwing team members under the bus like that, we're going to address that. We're going to say, love the results. We have to work on the behaviors in order to drive up your performance. And so as I sit here coming on 6 years at Cloudflare and joined a company that was 300 and now seeing it at 3,000, and it still feels like the same company I joined, which is important to me because I joined because I felt like this is a place I could have the career of my dreams, that I could do my best work by being my best self. And so I don't want that culture to change over time. So people will tell me, oh, high growth companies, culture changes. And I continue to push back on that. Like, I don't know that I want the culture to change, because people join companies because that culture, that mission resonates with them. So I would like us to preserve that as we grow. Certainly we're gonna get bigger, more complex. We'll get more things done at once. We'll be innovating like crazy. But the things that we value, the behaviors that make you successful, I don't think that should change over time. And so I think as long as we, especially as leaders across the company, hold ourselves accountable to that very simple equation, we don't turn a blind eye to bad behavior when it inevitably will show up. I think we stay the course and preserve culture as we grow. And I think that's one of the things that makes Cloudflare a really special place.
You know, when I was doing my research, and yes, to the audience, I do my research. There's a brain in me somewhere, I guarantee you. When I was doing my research, you know, that hashtag life at Cloudflare. And I went on, I looked at, and it was hard to sort of like, I mean, it's used a few times, but it was hard to sort of understand, what does this actually mean? And in the last 3.5 odd minutes, you really helped me understand that. And I think this thing which you've looked at, analyzed how a company has grown. For those of you that are making a decision, remember this, I've said this many times, it's not just the company that's interviewing you, you're interviewing them. Know that journey, know that transition, who's at the top, what's the culture like, so on and so forth. And I'm going to come to that very shortly, because I think that curiosity and that tenet of curiosity is something that I want to come back to Susan about. Scott, you're going to have to forgive me for this. I'm doing this because, you know, our green room conversations really triggered me in a positive way. I've seen a question come in. I know I said I'd bring it in the last 15 minutes, but I want to bring it up now. Scott, with everything that Janet said, now, how did the fact that you speak many languages yourself and being bilingual, did that have a particular special place at Cloudflare in the culture and the organization? Scott, just help us understand that a bit.
Excellent question. On a personal level, that helped me connect with a number of individuals, and also helped me really understand a lot of cultural nuances as we're growing the company across the globe. So yes to that question, and I will encourage anyone else on the call. Learning another language is an asset. It helps you communicate better. But, you know, the flip side is I'm not 100% sure I speak any of those languages correctly. So I became a lot more average in those languages. But to your point, one of the things I wanted to touch on is, which is tied to this, a lot of folks may be wondering, do I have to learn a lot of languages to work at Cloudflare? And that answer is, we have people that speak multiple languages. And then we have folks that have other superpowers. So is it difficult or easy to get a job at Cloudflare? And the answer is simply statistically, we hire less than 1% of our applicants. So it sounds very, very difficult. But in the words of Alexander Graham Bell, before anything else, preparation is key. So if you really, really, really want to work at Cloudflare, we have tons of resources. We have Susan, our deputy CISO on the call, who shared a lot about what we're doing on the security front. And many of those items are shared on our blog post. It's a rich resource where you can learn to understand our products, services, culture, and who and how we look for talent. And you can also spend the time there to understand our entire process. So we fundamentally believe that talent comes from all over the place, right? We want a diverse team, and we believe that diverse teams are critical to the success of the company. So you don't have to speak French, German, Swahili, or speak 10 languages to get to Cloudflare. But the one thing you can do really is immerse yourself in the products and services that we have, learn more about how we do business, learn more about our mission and culture. And Janet touched on something earlier, touched on our 6 capabilities. And I wanted to spell them out for you. So the first one is really communicate clearly, directly, and transparently. Both Janet and Susan on the call have been super transparent about who we are. The second one is doing the right thing. Third one is getting your work across the finish line. Third one is leading with empathy and assuming good intention. Fifth one, I think I'm on the 5th one by now. Be curious, learn, and grow. And then, of course, last but not least, embrace diversity to make Cloudflare a better place.
Thank you so much for that, Scott. And since we are on the topic of quotes, the one thing that I will say, and yes, that stat, the 1% stat, can throw you off a little bit, can make you a little bit nervous. Will you get through or not? But you only truly fail until you stop trying. And I can tell you that if you get the chance on the Cyber Exchange platform, connect with Scott, connect with Janet, connect with Susan, and you will hear of stories, although I don't know it with certainty, I can say it from experience. You'll hear about people that have applied, didn't get through the first time, applied again, applied a third time, and then got through. So you got to keep on trying. There's no failing. There's only lessons learned. Although I wish I could tell that to my mom, because every time I didn't do well in biology and chemistry, I had a lot to hear about. I wish I could have told my teachers that there's no failing. I didn't fail, just lessons learned. Anyway, separate subject.
Hey, Ali, can I give folks that joined a little trick that
Absolutely.
Scott knows where I'm going with this. So it is that number can be intimidating, but there are ways that you can stand out. I love a good cover letter. So many people don't do them. But to me, a resume is like a statement of fact, like a reflection of the work that you've done. A cover letter is where you get to talk about yourself and why you're passionate about this job at Cloudflare and why we're the right company for you, and really to express more of who you are, at the heart. And that really resonates deeply at Cloudflare. So I would encourage everyone who's listening to this, send a cover letter, tell us why Cloudflare, why you love us, why you love the job, and that you heard about it here. And I'm telling you, we reread these things and they really can make a difference.
I just want to third that. And especially I've hired people with no direct experience for the role, but because they showed high passion, which as Janet and Scott have outlined, equals alignment with our culture, and as well as genuine curiosity and the fact that they have done the work to see how they fit into it. Especially I think there's a question around internships. I highly encourage students to do this, right? You're earlier in your career, your resumes are less likely to be able to be highly differentiated. Your ability to show your passion in those letters really make the difference. And Scott and Janet know the numbers for internship applicants. It is very high. And I have gone through thousands of them, even at Cloudflare, and we definitely go at times by the ones that really show their heart and passion.
And to that point, sorry to cut you off, Ali.
Not at all.
In 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, while many companies were pausing their intern programs, we found a way to hire interns. And in fact, we doubled
our program, right?
Yes. And fascinating, right? We found ways, and some of our really awesome engineers, we don't just hire technical folks, but awesome engineers, awesome folks at Cloudflare started as interns. So to Susan's point, it is a fantastic way to really start at Cloudflare. And we've been building relationships with U of T, and we've hired folks in Waterloo. We had interns that were based in several different provinces in Canada, and it really excites me to be on the call and for folks to ask about internship and co-ops.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And again, I love it. They've embraced the idea of change. We said questions at the end, but they've started taking it up. And that's called burning the box. There is no box. There is no script for this session. That's the only rule. There are no rules. But thank you for that. And Scott, what's very interesting is I got a private message just now around neurodiversity. So I'll take that up at about 4:20 p.m. EST. Susan, I want to come back to you. And I agree with everything you said, right? Is that even if they don't have the technical skills, if they have that attitude, that you can teach someone a certain set of skills. Now, this is not to say if you've never touched SOC environments before that we're going to put you in charge of managing an endpoint. If you haven't been taught how to build a bridge, we're not going to ask you to build that, but there is the attitude that you bring to the table. That said, Susan, I'm going to ask you a bit of a pointed question. So it's one thing that, Janet and Scott have done their piece with their teams. They've hired certain security personnel that have the right attitude, that have the right passion and curiosity that you're looking for. But then as security folks, and as you can attest to as well, we do have certain things that keep us going. For us, it's not just about just want to monitor the network. Ooh, that's anomalous. Switch off the board. Yay, save the internet. We want to do research. We want to thrive. We want to do things that allow us to burn the box, so to speak. And the black hoodie like culture that we have, and the black hat culture that we sometimes tend to have, and doing my thing, don't come in my space. How do you build a security culture where technically folks like you and I can actually thrive and feel like we're going somewhere?
It's like you're reading my mind, and I actually intentionally, and Janet and I may have subconsciously teamed up, is I intentionally did not wear black. I actually have fruits on my shirt, and so does Janet. And this was actually when we started at Cloudflare and started the security organization, it was an intentional choice to not ever have swag in black. And I personally love black. My closet full of black. But the imagery, the branding, right? We wanted to see not black hat hoodie hacker type of scenarios, but more nurses, enablers, guardian angels, people that really help the organization, help everyone do their jobs more securely, not do security for them, right? And I think that's the mental model we really want to move away from. We don't want to be the gatekeeper at the end of the road. We want to be the first person you come to when you say, I want to build this. Here's the architecture I'm thinking of, and we threat model it together, right? There was actually a period of time where comically, and it's a testament to how much we embrace this, the most complete diagram of a product was actually in the security threat model, because that's where we engage. We went in depth and we documented. So that was a kind of a fun fact that really exemplified that. And the value of that is security is one of the only teams, alongside actually the people team, that truly work with every single team at the company. And we don't just work with them. The secret sauce of security is to convince them that they want to do security things as part of their jobs, right? More than half of security work is not done by the security team. We just advise and help, right? And we help everyone kind of get there. So to us, we actually took it even one step further, and we picked a mascot. And our mascot is actually the phoenix, right? And that's because a phoenix is resilient. We know that we will rise up through the ashes better than ever, right? So incidents are when, not if. Our security team is to help the company be resilient. And also it rises above the clouds. You got Cloudflare, it's orange. Janet's seen our stickers and things like that. We just have this gorgeous phoenix that our design team created for us, and just really embodies who we try to be. And I think the last point I want to make is when you create that image, It's not just an image. You really have to act every day. I love what Janet said. It really resonates about performance equals results plus behaviors, right? And the behaviors need to be leading with empathy so that people want to work with you. They actually come to you. That's like the security nirvana, right? Instead of us knocking on the doors like, please care about this security and fix your vulnerabilities, they actually come. The head of engineering has oftentimes pinged us, say, hey, I have these vulns. I know they're not due for a couple of weeks, but I want to understand, why am I getting more vulns in this space? Yeah. Right. So when you are seeing this collaborative, helpful, warm team that really cares about other people, people actually come to you. And that actually helps you get your work done faster and more at scale.
Just to work with that just a little bit, Susan, and you'll forgive me for saying this, but, Cloudflare relatively in the scope of things, quite a young company, if you look at it historically, and if you look at it mathematically, the averages of companies, but it's also a point of privilege that you recognize that you were able to build this from the ground up. I always say this to my students and to people that I work with, that if you truly want to build or create apple pie from scratch, you got to create the universe. Because ain't nowhere you're going to get apples from, ain't nowhere you're going to manufacture the ingredients. You got to create the universe. And I really like the fact that you've understood that. You've got an opportunity, you've taken it, and you've built that security culture. Now, Janet said this really well, and the sociologist in her came out, and I've read quite a bit of sociology. I'll talk about that separately. My academic journey is a completely different. Look, man, where I grew up, you either could become a doctor, accountant, an engineer, or a doctor again. And I became none of those. So we'll talk about sociology a little later on. But Janet, you mentioned culture as a design almost for living. Now, one thing that does happen is sometimes, and this happens in my team, security folks, especially the technical ones, tend to get very siloed. Not just very siloed, extremely siloed. How do you work at Cloudflare to address those silos?
I think Susan should definitely answer this. I want to say two things as kind of like a lead in to where Susan may take this. Like, number one of the things that attracted me to Cloudflare is that we have, before my time, embraced that there are many paths that lead you into tech and to lead you to Cloudflare. And that diversity is going to be a strength for the company. So I've worked at other companies that, said they valued diversity, but then they only recruited from these like 4 universities or these 5 other companies they would poach from, and that was it. So I'm like, well, that really limits your ability to build diverse teams. And so I'd love for Susan to talk a little bit about when they did the mascot and the Phoenix. I'm telling you, it's beautiful and brightly colored. There's like orange and pinks and purples. It's gorgeous. There also behind that was a sense of, we're about to build a security organization, which is critical to the company. Cloudflare is a cybersecurity company. And so our security company our security team had to be aligned with our culture. It had to be a great partner for everyone in the company to build it, and they couldn't be scary, right? Because we always talk about the worst that can happen is that people in the company get afraid to report something. I did something wrong. I think I just fell for a phishing attack. And we want people to say, like, let us know. The more that we, even if it leads to nothing, most times it actually does lead to nothing. We would rather chase that down than be, exposed and vulnerable or not know. So they've done a really great job of encouraging everyone to feel like security is their job. But I think a big part of it too was from day one, they had a roadmap to build a diverse team that would be able to, resonate across the company and build relationships across the company. And the diversity of us as a global company and a technical company, deeply technical company, with a lot of non-technical people as well. So I want to use that as a stage for Susan to kind of, I think, brag a little bit more about this team, because it's pretty incredible.
The stage is yours, Susan.
I think Janet, I will hire her going forward as my hype woman in both in personal settings as well as business settings. So thank you. Yes, there's so many things that we're pulling on here, and I'll try to tie some of them together. One of them is, in order to not be siloed, you really have to build a diverse team, right? And unfortunately, in security, the vast majority of applicants are unfortunately not diverse. And there are statistics and psychology and sociology around why that occurs. So we, as a concrete thing we did, is actually require hiring managers before they even open the role, they have to go find candidates that they're excited about, right? And we actually say, try find, equal number of diverse candidates as not diverse candidates, and move them through that. Like that intentionality at the hiring process is very important. The second thing is, and I myself an example, is we want to embrace non-traditional career paths, right?
Yep.
We don't know where you started your career or your educational journey. You may have not been aware that cybersecurity was an option or a possibility for you. And so I didn't, security is maybe my third life, so to speak, or fourth life. And, one of the ways we do that, and I cannot express how much gratitude I have to be working alongside Scott and Janet to achieve this, is and this is also a question, is we require no certifications or even degrees, period, on the security team. You don't need any of that. We want to know what you can do with your information, not how you got it, right? And it's powerful because at one point on our leadership team, we had someone that never got a college degree. We also have PhDs. We also have people, leading our governance risk compliance that never got an official certification. But wow, does she know some of the most about certifications I've ever met in anyone in my life. So that ability to embrace, no matter where you come from, if you can go through and show that you can do the job, we will welcome you on that. And I've actually, on the third point, is I was so grateful to even get guidance. And I think that's the thing, is continuous learning, iteration.
Yeah.
There's been so much movement in society. You have to be open to, I set out to create diverse organization. Here's how I do it. You don't just stop there. You continuously seek feedback on what's working, what's not working, right? There's still areas we stumble on a little bit, right? And one thing, for example, our amazing recruiter did was actually, and I believe this is a requirement, is before any job description can be posted, someone on Scott's team actually looks at it and be like, does the way this is written inclusive? Is the way this is written going to attract the right people, right? So for example, unless it's for very senior roles, we try not to say, you need 5 years of experience for this, because going to tie it back to one of the statistics that really struck me is, and I felt this myself, is people, especially of diverse backgrounds, tend to not apply for jobs that they don't feel like they hit 90% of this requirements explicitly. Whereas, a lot of times non-diverse folks, they'll be like, I hit 20%. Yep, shoot my application over, right? And so we risk excluding people, or we risk creating an environment where they exclude themselves. And we don't want that, because that's not what we're looking for. So that's been something that has really played out over time that I'm extremely grateful to have the support of the people team, because there's been many CISO conversations in which security leaders go, I wish I could do that, but the HR team requires that that they have a college degree. I require So if there's anyone listening that has any impact on the ability to set policy within your organization, in whatever format, this is an area I'd love to see change on. And I think we all do, so that we can welcome, no matter what background you come from, where you started, you can still be in cybersecurity and thrive. I mean, one of the best vulnerability management leaders I've ever worked with started as a therapist. Guess what? There's nothing like your ability to empathize with every single engineering team, what they're dealing with, to get them to realize you care about them and not just to fix the vuln. And they're like, okay, you understand what I'm going through. I'll actually work with you to fix that.
You couldn't have said it any better. And as I always like to say, is like, don't let your education come in the way of your learning. Now, again, I do need all of you to enroll into your courses, because that's how I stay employed. But you get what I'm saying, is that there's continuous learning that takes place over here. And Susan, again, and I will throw this in there in 10 seconds. There is this position, or this sort of stereotype that we have: the technical folks, the CISOs, the CIOs, the CTOs, don't necessarily think, they just think about data. Here's a very good example where somebody has not just looked at data, but also context. And that is key when you're trying to build good security cultures. Now, folks, we've got about 11 more minutes, and I know we have two.
Ali, quick thing I want to add to that is I think this sort of mindset in the execution of it was entirely, sure, Cloudflare, we believe in diversity, but it was entirely driven by our security team and the leadership that we have there. So I would say kudos to the security team that we have, which is, I think, the leading security team in the industry, and they can offer a master class on this. And along with that, Susan and team, I want to mention that this shouldn't be left to the recruiter or to your HR professional, right? Think about the vast, so for example, in our case, the vast and expansive network that we run, the number of countries and what we want to achieve and the threats that you could get. And having a really, really diverse team can only boost that, right? And I'm a sports fanatic, so I don't want to bore you with that. If you're building the best sports team and you go to one source every single time, to the same school, the same training camp, you miss out on some of the best talent. So kudos to the security team for really thinking outside the box and making diversity a priority. And it's clear that our security team is the leading security team.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. You couldn't have said it any better. So about 9 more minutes. And Janet, I want to come to you with a pressing question, and then I'll weave in some of the other questions that we got from the audience. Keep them coming. 9 minutes, we can get through quite a bit. So Janet, both Susan and Scott have talked about diversity of thought, diversity of skill, and representation. We know very well from your own practices, looking at diverse groups, people of color, people from different educational backgrounds, people with different sexualities and genders. Despite this really strong push, especially from organizations like Cloudflare, we do find that groups are still underrepresented in the security space. Janet, if I can start with you, why do you think that's the case?
Well, I think that there are different parts of organizations that tend to be more creative or open to change. And I think if you think about just what the security teams generally have on their plate, it's like a reduce risk, de-risk everything for the company, right? And so I think, as we saw other teams within organizations be much more open and able to move more quickly on diversity. I think security is just by definition a team that wasn't as ready to, maybe you said like they don't, and a lot of security companies put the N in innovate, or the no in innovate.
The no in innovate.
I totally butchered your really awesome line there. And so I do think that there is just a hesitancy to do what quote unquote like feels risky, because when you typically think of who's a great security engineer, you have a image of a black hooded hacker. And so props to Susan and Joe Sullivan on our team, because they purposely from day one said that isn't the team that we're going to build here. It's not going to be, if we don't make change, we're not going to be the strongest team, and we're going to miss out on some really great talent. So I think part of the holdup is just that there's a fear that if I start hiring people that don't have this traditional background, that don't fit this traditional profile, I'm taking a risk. And I'm afraid to suffer consequences for making a wrong decision. And so you kind of need security organizations, I think, like Cloudflare, to show you, no, this is how you build world-class security. Because our team, I think, looks very different than any other security organization in the industry. And I agree with Scott. I think we're world-class and the best that's out there. And I think a big part of that is how diverse they are.
Absolutely. No, well said. And, in keeping with that theme of diversity, Scott, now, because we got about 6 minutes, I want to weave you back into the conversation, and then we'll teleport back to Susan. Scott, there was a question that was direct messaged to me, and feel free if you don't have enough perspective on this. It was a question on neurodiversity. And how does that factor into the way in which you look for the ideal candidate at Cloudflare? Scott?
Great question. So I'm not an expert in neurodiversity, but I believe that the definition around that is simply an approach to education and ability that supports the fact that various neurological conditions are the effect of changes and variations in the human genome. So being able to hire people that are on all the different spectrums. Now let me address this really quickly here. Is this thinking more long-term about talent and thinking more long-term about what you're building as an organization will really help you build a very, very diverse team. Usually what tends to happen is you have a number of organizations that think they just want to build something now to win today based on the current market conditions and based on the talent pool that exists. But the winning organizations, in my view, very similar to what Susan and Joe Sullivan's team have done, our security team have done, they build for the future. And they understand that there's never enough talent pool that fits a particular description. And then you also want to be able to understand a vast array of the population, right? Yeah. And also understand how different things operate in different countries. So when we start to talk about diversity, it's so expansive that we don't do it justice when we're only thinking about short-term approaches. The second thing I want to add to that is that sometimes what you want to do, going back to my African roots, is you want to water the plant in a field and let it grow, right? You can't just harvest everything and think that you have enough stored up, right? Yeah. So plant, let it grow, harvest, keep planting, let it grow, harvest. The best at that really are always planting, number one. Number two, they're always watering their plants. And that's how you grow a vast field. That's how you grow a really rich field. So that's my. I
want to tag on one thing too. Like, I am so excited about the changes that we made around the future of work and where people are working and this more embracing remote work and be more flexible. I think this hopefully ends up being a huge a game changer around building more diverse teams, because I think the ability to not have to come into an office can help people who have physically struggled to get into an office now be a highly functioning, high performing member of a team that might not have been available to them. I think the same is for neurodiversity. So I think there's a lot of advantages with being more flexible about where people work that hopefully will help us. I already feel like it's already changing the conversation around diversity. For so long, it was gender identity, race, and ethnicity. And then maybe sexual orientation came up. And now we are talking about gender diversity and physical abilities and all these things that I really feel like the conversation has been more expansive because of the opportunities that changes around where we work now offer companies and teams.
Well said, Janet. Much appreciated. Now, folks, just so that if we go back, and I think by memory, not always the best thing for me to do, but we covered quite a few of the questions. I know we had one or two questions, who's the ideal candidate, but in some shape or fashion, we've touched on it. We've touched on the diversity from a technical standpoint, the diversity from other contextual standpoints, and more importantly, to the audience that's listening, you've got a little bit of insight on how to plan for your, if you're applying to apply at Cloudflare, you've got a little bit of insight. Feel free to reach out to the team on Cyber Exchange or on LinkedIn, wherever you choose. Very quickly, Janet, if I could just put you on the spot here, are there any certifications from Cloudflare itself that people can take, or is it agnostic from that perspective?
I see Susan nodding. I think anything that you do that show that you're invested in the company is a benefit, because it shows that you're taking time and you care. It'll give you an advantage. But like to Susan's point earlier, none of our job descriptions are going to have certification requirements. Like there's benefits like diversity certifications, SHRM certifications for an HR perspective, but none of them are hitting a matrix that like are a requirement for a job.
Fantastic. Ooh, I see a very quick one. Anyone, whoever wants to, can unmute first in 30 seconds. If you can tell us, an issue of ageism has come up. Does age matter, like 40 and up?
No. That's another example of where I feel like the concept and the conversation around diversity is expanding in a much more positive way is around age and tech as well. Fantastic. Being over 40 is great. We love that experience. Makes you wise. That's what I say.
In our security org, we have multiple people in every age bracket going up to the 60s.
Thank you very much for that. Now, very quickly, as a closing comment, I'll give you all 30 seconds. My mom always tells me is that you go far, not just because you can go far, you go far so that you can get there and then you can see further ahead. You've come pretty far as individuals at Cloudflare. Susan, we'll start with you. What does the road ahead look like for you? 30 seconds, very quick, closing comments.
For me, the road ahead for me is continue to be excited by the people that I get to work with and what we get to do together. And I want to expand that past Cloudflare, right? Security is a team sport. And that team is the entire industry. So whether those of you listening end up at Cloudflare or not, I'm 100% certain we will cross paths, we will influence each other, we will help each other. And that is truly the part that I care most about at an industrial level.
Thank you for that. If you want to go fast, go alone. You want to go far, let's go together. Thank you for that really powerful message, Susan. Janet, what is the next little while look for you in the future?
I'm like, that's a hard act to follow. I love that. I think for me, it is like, I'm excited about much more flexibility around where we work. I think that expands talent pools for all of us, and hopefully helps, whether to Susan's point, Cloudflare or any other company, really build more diverse teams, because in the long run, that is how we're going to win.
Well said. Scott, mic drop at you.
Yes, so I would say you can come from anywhere and be very successful in the security space. And I'm an example of that. You can grow up in one of the tiniest countries in the world, where English is not even your first language, speak other languages, and as long as you're passionate about what you do, and then also follow great leaders and learn from great leaders. I've learned a lot from Janet Van Huysse, who's on the call, and as you can see, Susan is smiling and laughing there in the background. I just had the privilege to work with great leaders and great folks across the board. So do that.
Well said. And I say this all the time when students ask me, why do I keep teaching despite being in industry as well? It's because to teach is to learn. The more you teach, the more you learn from your students as well. And you never know. You might be learning from leaders. You might be learning from the intern. There's a lot to learn. Janet, Susan, Scott, we are 1 minute over time. And I know the team at CyberX has a major event coming up, and they've got another show after this. So with that, the first thing that I'm going to do is, Scott, Janet, Susan, thank you so much for your time. We had a good number of viewers that listened to you, and I know this is also going to go on demand. Please don't go offline yet. I'll bid the audience adieu, and then we'll just have a 30-second quick discussion in the green room, because I actually did get some inquiries, which I'll share with you in the green room. So once again, Susan, Janet, and Scott, thank you so much for your time. To our audience, normally when I listen to these sessions, I take lots of notes and then I try to summarize it. I don't have the luxury of time right now, but here's one thing that I'll say. And I'll speak personally. When I was made an offer once by a company and I walked away from it, and I said something, and it was a very good offer, by the way. The numbers were good. I remember walking out and saying the employer gets the employee that they deserve. And I didn't really like that employer, and they didn't deserve to have me. But in the case of Cloudflare, they're clearly doing something right, and they're doing something that makes them deserving of individuals like these three individuals that were on the call today. So with that, once again, Susan, Janet, and Scott, thank you for your time. To our audience, this will be my last power hour for the month of July. I do take some time to travel. Travel is a great way to learn more and experience more. So I will be traveling. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll be seeing me across places in the Middle East, and I'll be live Instagramming and tweeting from there as I learn about local cultures. Stay tuned for that. I'll be back with the Power Hour mid-August, and then onwards from there, leading into CISO Forum 2022. If you're coming to the Cyber Meetup on Thursday, I'll see you there. Otherwise, wherever you are in the world, stay safe, stay healthy, and more importantly, stay connected. Until next time, this is your host, Ali Hirji, wishing you the best of health and the very best in general. Take care.